More than 74 million people tied to Social Security, SSI, SSDI, Veterans Affairs, survivor benefits, and spousal benefits are focused on one question that refuses to go away. Is a larger payment increase coming? How big could it be? When could it arrive? And does anyone need to take action to receive it? That is the center of this entire conversation. And here's the twist. The discussion is no longer just about a routine adjustment. It is increasingly framed around a potential $2,400 increase in benefits overall, or a fixed $200 increase every single month for senior and disability benefit recipients who have been pushed to the edge by rising costs. What most people miss is that this issue is not abstract for the people affected by it. Many seniors are already under crushing pressure, and a large number are dealing with housing insecurity because rent simply outpaces what their checks can cover. That is the heart of the crisis. The pressure is not theoretical, and it is not minor. It is immediate, personal, and tied to survival. Right now, there are still more than 5 million seniors receiving checks from the Social Security Administration that remain below 40-level checks, and that reality is presented as a national disgrace, especially in a country described as sending billions of dollars to other nations to help them survive and thrive while also contributing billions and even trillions of dollars to numerous wars, even as its own seniors and disability recipients continue to struggle. So the argument being made is straightforward. If there is ever a time for a meaningful raise in benefits, that time is now, because the affordability pressure has become impossible to ignore and the gap between expenses and support keeps widening. The demand coming from many of these recipients is not framed as a request for special aid. It is framed as a request for fairness. They are asking for their benefits to finally keep pace with the inflation they are facing in everyday life. And when you look at the numbers being cited, the frustration becomes easier to understand. According to the CBS Price Tracker, food prices alone are up 19.1%, while rents are up on average by 21.8%. And those figures are used to drive home one major point. How are seniors and disability recipients supposed to survive when the essentials they depend on grow more expensive far faster than their checks? Now watch this, because this is where the conversation becomes even more urgent. There are seniors and disabled Americans who are described as homeless right now, and many are looking toward President Trump and this administration for some kind of relief, not in the sense of a luxury or a bonus, but in the sense of an increase that would make benefits line up with current inflation. That is where COLA, the cost of living adjustment, comes into focus. The claim being made is that COLA, as it currently works, does not actually match real inflation as seniors experience it. The criticism is aimed directly at the metric used to calculate it each year, CPIW, which is described as outdated, vague, and in need of replacement. And this is presented as one of the biggest structural reasons so many recipients feel left behind. Instead of using a formula seen as disconnected from the real spending patterns of older Americans and disabled recipients, a growing number of lawmakers from both the Democratic and Republican sides are said to be pushing this administration to switch the COLA formula from CPIW to CPIE. That proposed change is a major part of the story because CPIE is described as a metric that would focus specifically on senior spending patterns. In other words, it would examine how much seniors actually spend on rent, mortgage payments, groceries, utilities, and especially prescription medications, which are described as skyrocketing. Under that system, a new COLA would be set based on the categories that truly define senior living costs, rather than a broader formula that critics say misses the mark. And according to the analysts and experts mentioned in the script, if this administration approves that new COLA metric known as CPIE, the result could be an increase somewhere between $200 and $500 every single month for senior and disability recipients who receive not only Social Security, but also SSI, SSDI, Veterans Affairs benefits, railroad retirement, and survivor and spousal benefits as well. That projected increase is one of the biggest reasons the CPIE push is being framed as a potentially life-changing shift rather than a minor policy tweak. Supporters argue that it would permanently alter how benefits are calculated in a way that better reflects the real costs carried by the people who depend on them most, and the call to action attached to that argument is repeated clearly. If you support this change in the COLA metric, if you support this raise in benefits, then the message is to write in the comment section, "I support CPIE." That phrase is repeated because the broader message attached to it is just as direct. If people do nothing, then nothing will happen. Beyond the formulas and legislative proposals, the script keeps returning to the same stark reality. Millions of seniors are still unable to meet even their most basic needs. Some cannot manage 3 meals a day for themselves and their loved ones. That point is used to show that this is no longer about financial comfort. It is about whether people can cover food, housing, utilities, and medicine at all. And that is why longtime Social Security advocates are brought into the discussion. Names specifically mentioned include John Elson, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Sherrod Brown, all of whom are described as pushing the same central idea. Increase the benefits, or at the very least make the benefits parallel to current inflation. That message is described as consistent across several bills that have been introduced to address the issue. One of the most important bills highlighted in the script is linked to Bernie Sanders. It is described as a proposal that calls for replacing CPIW with CPIE, but that is only part of it. The bill is also described as asking for a fixed monthly increase of $200 in benefits for all recipients. Yes, a fixed $200 raise each month, and that amount is repeated for emphasis because it is positioned not merely as a policy proposal, but almost as a direct reflection of what millions of seniors and disability benefit recipients have been hoping to see. The bill is referred to as the Social Security Expansion Act. The explanation given is that it was introduced a few years ago and then introduced again more recently, or reintroduced, with the same broad purpose of strengthening benefits and changing the COLA metric. Here's the twist that drives the frustration higher. The script states that when the bill came back, Mike Crapo blocked it. That claim is framed as proof that even proposals built around helping millions of seniors and disabled Americans can be stopped despite the severity of the affordability crisis. And from there, the script returns to one of its most emotionally charged comparisons, repeating that billions of dollars go to other nations, and billions and trillions are spent on wars, while seniors and disabled Americans at home continue to struggle. The underlying message is blunt and accusatory. How can that spending continue while vulnerable Americans remain under such financial strain? That frustration feeds directly into the next major point, which is that there is no doubt in the framing of the script that this is the moment for benefit increases because the affordability crisis is already here. It is not presented as a future concern or a warning sign on the horizon. It is described as a present reality already squeezing households, already creating hardship, and already exposing the limits of current benefit levels. And this is where the discussion broadens beyond Social Security reform alone. The script argues that the pressure has become so intense that not only Republicans, but even Democrats are now asking President Donald J. Trump about a stimulus payment. J.B. Pritzker is specifically said to have sent an invoice to President Trump calling for $1,700 to each and every resident. Gavin Newsom is also said to be asking for $1,151 worth of stimulus to Americans. Those figures are included to support a larger political observation being made in the script. If a relief bill or a stimulus check proposal emerges from President Trump, from the Republican Party, or from the Democratic Party, then there is said to be a high chance Congress would approve it, because both parties are described as being on the same page right now. That is presented as the good news woven through the larger concern. Even though the affordability crisis is severe, and even though major proposals have faced opposition, the alignment of both parties on the broader need for relief is framed as a sign that some kind of approved support could have a clearer path if a bill is formally advanced. The script keeps circling back to public support because that support is portrayed as part of the pressure campaign needed to move policy. Again and again, the audience is urged to say whether they support the increase in benefits and whether they support the CPIE metric that could permanently reshape how those benefits are calculated. The repeated prompt remains the same. If you support it, write in the comments section, "I support CPIE." That call is paired with another recurring request to smash the like button, reinforcing the idea that visible engagement matters and that public pressure can help keep these proposals in motion. But underneath those repeated prompts is a much bigger narrative about who the system is working for and who it is failing. The script emphasizes that seniors and disability recipients are not asking for extravagance, not asking for handouts in the way critics sometimes frame benefit increases, and not asking for anything beyond what would allow them to keep up with actual costs. The words used throughout the original message build a picture of recipients who are being overtaken by rising prices in food, rent, utilities, mortgages, and prescriptions, while their benefit calculations remain tied to a formula critics call stale and insufficient. That is why the potential switch from CPIW to CPIE is treated as so important. It is not just another acronym in a policy debate. It is presented as the dividing line between a system that undervalues the real expenses of seniors and a system that would finally account for what they actually pay. Under the script's framing, that difference could mean hundreds of dollars more every month, possibly between $200 and $500. And for people choosing between rent and groceries, that range is not small. It could be the difference between falling behind and staying afloat. It could be the difference between managing prescriptions and skipping them. It could be the difference between remaining housed and becoming homeless. That is why the argument keeps returning to urgency. And the urgency is reinforced by the repeated statement that more than 74 million recipients across Social Security, SSI, SSDI, Veterans Affairs, survivor benefits, and spousal benefits are all watching for answers. The scale matters because this is not a narrow issue affecting a tiny group. It is a massive part of the population, touching retirees, disabled recipients, surviving family members, spouses, and veterans. The script leans heavily into the idea that the stakes are national and that the conversation can no longer be ignored or delayed. It also highlights how rule changes around Social Security are becoming stricter day by day, adding even more anxiety for recipients already under pressure. That stricter environment is contrasted with the very simple question being asked by millions of beneficiaries. When will relief arrive, and when will benefits finally rise enough to match the reality of inflation? The script insists that this is a fair question because inflation is not something recipients can escape. It shows up at the grocery store, on rent bills, in utility statements, and in prescription costs. It shows up in every decision about how to stretch a fixed check across a month that never seems affordable anymore. And that is why the message repeatedly says, the request is not unreasonable. It is only asking for benefits to become parallel to current inflation. That phrase is central to the entire argument because it frames the demand not as expansion for its own sake, but as an adjustment rooted in lived economic reality. Another layer of the script's message is the portrayal of lawmakers from both parties as increasingly aware of this pressure. By saying Democrats and Republicans are both pushing for a COLA-metric change, and by saying both parties appear aligned on the broader need for relief or stimulus, the script creates the impression of momentum building across partisan lines. Whether the issue is benefit reform through CPIE or direct relief through a stimulus-style payment, the core idea is the same. The affordability crisis has become too severe to dismiss, and support for intervention is no longer coming from just one side. That bipartisan element is what the script treats as one of the strongest reasons for hope. Even after describing proposals that were blocked, even after highlighting how many seniors are struggling, it still presents the possibility that Congress could approve future relief because both parties are described as being in agreement on the need for action. What most people miss is that the script's good news is not framed as an already delivered payment or an already passed law. It is framed as the possibility created by political alignment, the rising pressure for reform, and the fact that multiple proposals are already in the conversation. In that sense, the good news is the opening itself, the momentum itself, and the belief that a real increase could happen if enough pressure stays on lawmakers and the administration. The call for comments and likes is wrapped around that belief, but the underlying purpose is to signal support for policy change, especially the shift to CPIE and the push for a fixed $200 monthly increase. The tone remains urgent throughout, but it does not stop at warning. It also presses for participation, asking the audience to weigh in on the situation, to say whether they support higher benefits, and to say whether they want the CPIE metric that could change benefits forever. That phrase, change your benefits forever, is powerful because it suggests the issue is not only about one temporary bump or one one-time payment. It is about rewriting the formula that determines future adjustments going forward. And that is why the script keeps returning to the same phrases, the same numbers, and the same pressure points. More than 74 million recipients, a possible $2,400 increase in benefits overall, a fixed $200 increase every month, food prices up 19.1%, rents up 21.8% on average, more than 5 million seniors receiving below 40-level checks, a possible increase of $200 to $500 every month if CPIE is approved, a $1,700 call from J.B. Pritzker to each and every resident, a $1,750 stimulus request from Gavin Newsom to Americans. Each of these details is used to build the same conclusion from a different angle. The current support system is falling behind the costs people actually face, and pressure is building for change. Even the closing appeal in the original message reflects that effort to keep the conversation active. Viewers are invited to leave questions in the comments with the assurance that those questions would be answered. That final invitation matters because it keeps the audience inside the issue rather than treating the subject as finished. It says this conversation remains open, the concern remains ongoing, and the push for answers is still active. Strip away the repeated engagement requests, and the central message remains intense and unmistakable. Millions of seniors and disabled Americans are struggling under the weight of inflation. Many cannot comfortably cover necessities. Some are already homeless. The current COLA formula, based on CPIW, is criticized as outdated and detached from real senior spending. Lawmakers from both parties are pushing for a switch to CPIE. That change is said by analysts and experts to potentially raise monthly benefits by $200 to $500 for recipients of Social Security, SSI, SSDI, Veterans Affairs, Railroad Retirement, and Survivor and Spousal benefits. Bernie Sanders' Social Security Expansion Act is highlighted as a major proposal that combines the CPIE switch with a fixed $200 monthly raise. The bill is said to have been reintroduced and then blocked by Mike Crapo. And at the same time, the affordability crisis is described as so severe that stimulus-style relief is also being discussed, with J.B. Pritzker calling for $1,700 to each and every resident, and Gavin Newsom calling for $1,151 worth of stimulus to Americans. Put all of that together, and the message lands with force. The demand for relief is growing, the numbers behind the pressure are getting harder to deny, and the people depending on these benefits are still waiting for a system that finally reflects the real cost of living.